What rule was implemented because of you? Story 1 year ago, I bought a computer from Dell. I paid for it with my debit card and excitedly monitored the build status every day, checking in at work and on my days off going to the library to check on expected shipping updates. When I made the purchase, it was a 5 to 7 day expectation for delivery. At day 10, when it had gone from order accepted to order prep to order build, it suddenly went back to order accepted. Stage 1, I called their customer service line and was told there had been a glitch in the system, and the order got expedited and soon was back at order built, and I was just waiting on shipping confirmation. The next day, back to order accepted again. This happened every day for 5 days. Cue another call to customer service. Apparently, there was a problem with payment, and they refer me back to my bank because the payment was on hold. Called my credit union, and they told me it was just an authorization hold waiting on final confirmation from the merchant. Called Dell back, and they saw the same thing, but even the customer service director couldn't say why it hadn't finalized. But every time the payment didn't finalize, they literally took the box with the computer off the loading dock and sent it back to stage 1, again and again and again. This led to a long hold while the customer service director looked into their billing system and ended up transferring me to a very nice lady in their accounting department. Initially, she thought I was an in-house person from the listing dock asking about a customer's order, but quickly got up to speed. She was covering for a coworker who helped with in-house billing system troubleshooting, who was out on vacation, and usually just handled tracking the accounting from Dell, sending parts from one warehouse and factory to another. But she dug in and figured out that the issue was that I was paying with a debit card, not a credit card. Now, debit card were still relatively new. Most banks capped the amount you could spend per day, $250 to $500, but my credit union was one of only 5 financial institutions that didn't cap it at all. They proudly noted on a monthly statement insert that the credit union felt that it was your money to manage the way you wanted to. However, Dell didn't accept debit cards at all. Not for a dime. Not for the $800 I was trying to spend. The nice lady in accounting, however, had just come back from conference and knew that there was a push to gain more banks to act like my credit union and remove their spending caps. She told me to hang tight, and she was going to get it done for me. I told her I could change my payment method to a credit card, but she told me that would delay the whole process. 2 days later, I got a call from her. She had made a presentation to the CEO, CFO, and several VPs, making the case that Dell needed to get ahead of the curve and start accepting debit cards with no spending limits, because the banking rules were going to be changing very soon, and more people were going to be spending money with Dell the way I tried to. They had to implement a process to start accepting debit cards, which had required a rush overnight change from their merchant bank, and my purchase was their test case. She had me check with my credit union, who showed the funds were officially a purchase and not just an authorization hold. Then she called the loading dock and made sure my computer was on a truck. Within 10 minutes, I had an email with a tracking number, TLDR, and the reason Dell takes debit cards. Story 2, marbles being banned at my elementary school. I vaguely remember the convoluted rules we had for playing marbles in 3rd grade, but one that was written in stone was that if you lost a game, you had to throw away a marble of your own. This often drew a crowd of participants eager to get their tiny hands on a free marble. One day, I lost a game and was forced to throw a marble away. We called it scrambling. I had stupidly agreed to offer up as ante for the game my prize boulder, a heavy marble with intricately woven colors that was about the size of a golf ball. When it was time to throw it away, a large crowd of kids had gathered, impatiently jeering me to toss it and start the melee. I took one last look at my boulder and, in a surge of 8-year-old rage, launched it with all my strength. I still remember it gleaming against the deep blue sky as it left my hand. It sailed, flew over the group's head, their mouths agape in amazement. It flew until it struck some poor blonde kid in the head, who was just walking along, kicking dandelions, totally oblivious to the incoming projectile. It hit him hard. To this day, I still recall the way his head snapped back in Zapruder-like fashion. He dropped instantly, like a bag of old socks. We all scattered to the 4 corners of the playground as teachers ran to his side. The following day, a letter was sent home to every parent, banning all marbles. Poor Blondie McMarblehead, I forget his name, this was 32 years ago, was off school for about a week. Edit spelling edit 2, am getting lots of questions about what happened to the marble. It was confiscated by the teachers, my friends reminded me. To my horror, that it had my fingerprints on it. I had many sleepless nights worrying that the marble would incriminate me. At one point, I developed an elaborate scheme to break into the principal's office and retrieve it by elaborate. I planned to eat a ton of tuna, because it had made me vomit once before, and use that to get access to the nurse's office, which was adjacent to the principal's. Then I would pretend the need to vomit again, rush to her garbage can directly next to the desk, and swipe the marble. Thankfully, our school flooded several days later, and I quickly forgot about the incriminating evidence. Story 3. After having my 2 front teeth replaced, band director okay. I never thought I'd have to say this, but wrestling is not allowed in the band room. Story 4. At Boy Scout summer camp, as a scoutmaster, no campfire flames higher than 24 inches. Turns out that if you make a 5-foot tower out of only the 14 dowels from small American flags, you get a straight and narrow column of flame about 30 feet high. I was the Clark Griswold of Scoutmasters. Story 5. Not me, but someone I worked security with at the G20 summit. Long story short, we were screeners at the entrance, our x-ray machine like the one you'd see at the airport, with a treadmill-type bit pulling bins through some hanging rubber guards in the x-ray, was a hassle. See, the issue was most delegates had very little to put through. A watch, a belt, a wallet, the odd item here and there. The curtains were pretty stiff, so the issue was with only these light items in the bin, it could never get through the curtains. Their weight was greater, so it just spun on the treadmill stuck before them. One of the geniuses on a team next to me came up with a solution. We shall take 6 water bottles and tape them together in a bowling pin-style triangle with black duct tape. This will weigh down the bin so it can get through, and I must admit it worked like twice until the next delegate mistook it for a bomb. And picture it, 6 bottles with no labels and some fluid in them black taped together. The RCMP got involved. It was a whole scene. No custom McGiver weights are to be used by screeners any longer. Story 6. In my sophomore year of high school during the short World War I unit, the sophomore history teachers had an event where we went out to the football field and played one flag capture the flag using dodgeball rules. One team had the flag and had trenches made of football training equipment, and the other team had to charge across no man's land and touch the flag to win. Occasionally, the teachers would call out a gas attack, and everyone would have to don paper bag gas masks, or they were out. I had the genius plan of charging the main trench directly without a dodgeball to try to neutralize it to help my team. I handed my ball to a classmate and instead wielded a cardboard trench shovel I had made that morning and then put on my gas mask ahead of time. When it was time to go over the top, I barreled towards the main trench, think that one Battlefield 1 trailer where the British soldier does the same thing with a club. But this was 2 years before that game came out. I miraculously was never hit on my way to it and slammed into that thing with all of my might, taking it down, knocking a couple other kids over, and knocking myself out for a few seconds in the process. The teachers thought it was hilarious, but they quickly had to implement a no-trench busting rule after someone else tried to replicate my antics during the next round. Unfortunately, as far as I'm aware, that was the last year they did that event. Story 7. In my first year of university, I took philosophy as an elective, and our professor said on the first day that he was easygoing and didn't mind if assignments were late and wouldn't dock points. I turned all 8 papers he assigned into him the day of our final exam. True to his word, he graded them all fairly and didn't deduct points for lateness. I took a class with him the next year, and on the first day, he said that due to past events, he'd accept a late assignment only with a note from a doctor or if someone died while making eye contact with me. Story 8. Not taking shelter while a tornado is on the ground is considered insubordination. Edit LOL. It's not much of one. I was working late to meet some deadlines, and my job allows flex time. So basically, I can work up to 4 hours extra spread out over the week and bail 4 hours early on another day, as long as it's the same pay period and I arrange in advance. I had to get this stuff in before deadline, or I could not leave early the next day. So I was working extra BC. I had a DR appointment coming up. It's like 6:30 p.m. when the sirens go off. There are maybe 20 of us still in the building, and people go into the stairway. A few people just go home. So I tell a coworker I'm not going to seek shelter, and he'll be working, cool NP, while I'm working when around 7 p.m. the sirens are going off again, and there's a dude coming from the tech department making sure everyone seeks shelter. I don't recognize him, but whatever we go through, tech people like no one's business. He tells me to seek shelter. I say, unless it's in the handbook I'm not doing, I have work to do. We have a long stare. He says something about the tornado being X far away, and like I know I saw earlier out the other window. It's just a baby one won't even break glass, and it's not heading this way. Long stare. He seeks shelter. See him as I leave around 8 p.m., and he says something along the lines of looks like I was right about handbook and tornado being small, but it was a giant legal risk if I had been wrong. Found out the next day that dude was the CFO. He had the handbook amended, so anyone who left the building or didn't seek shelter would be considered insubordinate. Story 9. In college, we had a shuttle van that would carry you from your dorm to your car after dark. I got dropped off of my car and crossed in front of the van. The shuttle driver was on his phone, not paying attention, and started to drive. I felt the hood and grill start pushing into my shoulder and hip and was able to scream and then flail to get his attention before he ran me over. Now they have to go both ways down each row of cars in the parking lots to only let people out on the passenger side. Story 10 isn't really a rule, But the action happened when I was 9. The line at the post office in my neighborhood was very long, sometime 2 hours line, and didn't have a water cooler. I asked my dad, naively, why there wasn't a water cooler for the elders. We sent them a mail, and they put a water cooler there the next week. Story 11. During the annual canned food drive at my high school, you can bring ramen noodles, but they no longer count towards the total donated for the competition between the classes. This rule is from when I was a junior. They did all sorts of various competitions between the classes, and of course the seniors always won nearly everything. Well, during the food drive, the juniors concocted a plan to win the event. Instead of bringing in food, we would collect money, and a handful of people would hold it all until near the end. It would look like we were losing because our totals would be low, but then on the last day, they'd bring in a huge supply and would surprise them with the win. They wouldn't know how well we were actually doing until it was too late to do anything about it. I wasn't one of the money people, but a couple of them were friends of mine. The plan was to buy as much food as they could with the money they collected. So naturally, they bought ramen noodles because it's the cheapest thing in the store. I don't know how much money they had, but I think they must have gotten special order shipments in on the last day of the drive. When I came in, there was a room full of pallets of noodles stacked 5 feet high. I was completely blown away. It was an insane amount of ramen. Based on the number of items brought in, we had like double the sophomores and seniors combined. It was nuts. Story 12. In 8th grade, we had an essay question on a social studies test that read something like this. Imagine you're a miner during the gold rush. What would your life be like? Detail your day-to-day life in a diary. Entry below. I wrote mine to actually sound like it was written by someone not from this time period. Next time we had a diary entry style essay question, I saw in the directions, make sure to write your essay using clear and proper English. I never followed that rule, and the teacher never cared enough to deduct points. Story 13. Gave myself a concussion in a college yoga class by having my mat too close to the mirror ballet bar. It's now a department rule that you can't be next to the mirror while stretching or doing yoga Pilates. It's been 7 years. Story 14. So my company pays for my food when I travel, which is awesome. I was fairly new to the job at the time, so I went to a lovely Nordic restaurant for brunch in Oregon. I ended up getting drunk on some delicious mimosas, paid for on a separate tab, and $25 worth of food. I was drunk, and my server was awesome, and ended up tipping him $100. A couple days later, my boss calls me and asked me why did you tip $25. Shortly after that, the company sent out an email to everyone with a strict 20 tip policy. Not really a single rule, but more of a full restructuring. When I worked as a nurse, there was a lot of things going on that were pretty shady, corners being cut, procedures not being followed, and such. A few colleagues, and I went to the board to complain. As we were finishing the meeting, the higher-ups told us that we opened Pandora's box and that they were appalled. I left shortly after, but in the meantime, they had put a team in place to work on the issues, and it was a show for a while. Story 15. In elementary school, we played wall ball, which I'm sure has all sorts of names and variations. 2 players and a red rubber inflatable ball. There would usually be a line next to the wall for who plays next. If you were next, you were the ref, which didn't consist of much, but sometimes you had to determine if a ball bounced before it hit the wall, or not hitting the wall without a bounce first was bad. I think it was called an ace. I didn't like standing next to the wall, so I invented ringside ref and would stand behind the players to get a better view. Years later in high school, I found out that the kids at that elementary school were still using my rule. Maybe it spread to other schools. I have no idea. Story 16. A card game called ERS Egyptian Rat Screw. No idea why it's called that. Essentially, it's like slapjack where you have to get to the pile first. Well, because I'm bomb at that game, no one would play with me without a few handicaps. So to circumvent my cat-like reflexes, they made a rule to touch your forehead before slapping the deck, or you don't get the cards. This led to a lot of full-on smacking yourself in the face really hard before they gave up on that rule. Plus, I still won, minus a few brain cells. Story 17. Used all of my annual leave in the summer in one block. A combination of public holidays and my annual leave allocation meant that I could take all of August off. More importantly, I switched off my phone. After 2 years of doing this, the vacation rules were changed so that people could only take a maximum of 2 weeks in one block. My chiefs just didn't want to deal with all that would come my way for that long. Edit going by the responses, it is worth noting that I am in the UK. I think at the time my annual leave consisted of 2,325 days, which at the time was about standard. I can't remember exactly, as it was over 20 years ago. So a combination of the annual leave, public holidays, and switching the phone off meant I didn't exist as far as the office was concerned for the last few days of July, all of August, and a few days in September. In some European countries, it is quite common to take all of August off. Depending on your industry and your length of service, I know a number of people who after 10, 15, 20 years will have an annual leave ranging from 39 months. It is a simple way for companies to ease people into semi-retirement. Story 18. I was at a course to teach how to use a new travel debit card for my job, instead of handing in projected expenses and having to reconcile the expenses when you got back. I realized that with the aid of one other person who just had to be lax in security, not necessarily in on my scam, I could gain access to everyone's travel money to the tune of $1 million, with a minimum of a 3-month window to get out of Dodge before it could possibly be picked up by the auditing team. I explained in detail during the lesson and had to give the instructor a written copy of how I would go about it, outlining the flaws in the system as I went along. A national policy was implemented remarkably quickly to stop it from happening, as there was 60 other workplaces that could do the same thing if they knew about it. Story 19, not me, but my mom. Back in the 80s, my mom was the definition of a coupon queen. She would browse every newspaper, pamphlet, etc. to find grocery store coupons to this particular chain near her house. Back then, there was no limit one per customer rule for the coupons, so my mom would chain together multiple coupons for practically everything. It got to the point where she would have so many discounts and cashback that she would get all her groceries for free, and the store would have to pay her money for the cashback rewards. After a few times doing this, the store finally implemented a limit one per customer rule. Story 20, not me, but my dad. My dad and his friends streaked through the school and then ran through a meeting. There apparently was not a no streaking rule, so they only got in trouble for skipping class. When I went to school there 20 years later, there was a no streaking rule. Story 21, my freshman English teacher knew going in that shed need to put minimum page limits on assigned essays. Apparently, I was the reason she also started adding maximum page limits. Story 22, in my master's program, no teams of 2 for a thesis. My teammate harassed me and ruined the whole project for me, and I reported her to the advisors. Now only teams of 3 to 6. Story 23, teachers should never have a final test worth almost all of your grade. I've had it happen twice in school that I never did any homework, but aced the test and passed my class with a B. Then next year teacher would update the syllabus to say, and if you do literally no homework, you still don't pass. Not recommended. Does not work every time. Story 24, you can't kill yourself in a game of murder. I was at youth group, and we were playing the game murder, where one person is the killer and one person is a detective. The rest are citizens. The lights are out, and there's no talking. The killer goes around killing people by tapping them on the shoulder, and the detective has to figure out which person is the killer. I was the killer in this instance, and as a gag, I killed myself, so that everyone walked around in anticipation of when the killer would strike, when really I was just lying there. Game went on for like 20 minutes before a youth pastor was like, all right, who's the killer? Do your job, we need to get this over with. I then reveal what I did. They were so mad, and they still call me out for it like 3 years later. Story 25, not me, but my dad. In 1967, he was hit by an ice cream truck in the small town he lived in, and the mayor, a close family friend, made it illegal for ice cream trucks to operate in the town. It's still illegal, and I have friends that still live there that whine all summer about the lack of trucks. If they only knew. Story 26, the 10th high school must honor any and all accommodations requested by a licensed psychologist, psychiatrist, or other psychological professional, and, related, all staff in accommodation meetings must read and understand the report provided. My high school was utter when it came to accommodations. It was the college prep school of the area, and silly little things like learning disorders weren't worth the VP's time. When I had a meeting to discuss the accommodations my neuropsychologist had detailed, the VP showed up 15 minutes late, totally unprepared. She then flicked through the report and settled on accommodations completely opposite to what was requested. My parents tried to get her to change, but she said the school wouldn't be able to meet my needs. Suffice it to say, my teachers, my parents, and I were livid. 2 of my teachers also tried to appeal, but the VP wouldn't budge, nor would she grant me access to a program geared toward atypical kids, so I dropped out, and apparently my teachers took it up at the school board. My history teacher in particular led the charge, but all of the teachers I had that year all contributed toward reporting the VP. The rules were implemented after I had settled in a home study program and realized I desperately needed to have time away from people. But it was nice to know that other students wouldn't be bullied into accepting accommodations that only make them struggle more. Story 27, once during an exam, I don't know the answer in a multiple choice question, so I made my eraser into a dice and rolled it. The next day, the school made a rule about no guessing multiple choice questions. Edit a lot of people saying how it is an unenforceable rule. What I meant was not a rule in a legalistic sense, but more of an encouragement to foster a good studying culture in my school. Story 28, my school had an excusal form in addition to the doctor's note, which had to be written by your parent or guardian explaining why you had to be excused from class. It had to be handwritten and signed by the parent or guardian. I was very good at copying people's handwriting and signatures, so the whole school knew that I was the person to go to if you needed a from. I became so popular that I wrote so many forms, and so often, one year that the next year the school board issued a rule that you could submit only one excusal form per semester. Story 29, if you happen to go to Girl Scout camp. The rule if you shot it with your bow and arrow, you have to dispose of the body, is because of my horrible archery skills. Sorry in advance. Story 30, only a temporary rule, but on a school trip, I really wanted to hang out with my male friend, and we weren't allowed in the common space, yet due to us only having just arrived at the hotel, so I snuck into his room and got caught sneaking out. Naturally, I ran but at dinner the teachers announced that if you were going to hang out in someone else's room, you had to have the door open from then on. Story 31, my middle school in the 90s band Superglue. The reason was that my teacher said we were going to have a test, not a final exam, on the last day of school. I protested by supergluing my hand to my desk. In my defense, we had had an exam the day before and been told previously that it would be a movie and popcorn day. I had an A already and was looking forward to a fun day. Story 32, color contact lenses were banned from my school because the teachers couldn't see my soul. I have no idea what they meant and still don't. Platforms with LEDs were banned. I don't know the reason, but I was the only one in our school who had platforms, so yep. Story 33, I had to give the competition an advantage over me at my work golf tournament. Because I won it easy 2 years in a row, I still won it again the third year, but they try to make it harder. Story 34, when I took over and managed our warehouse team, I made sure to schedule time off so we would never be shorthanded. I rotated holidays so it was fair for everyone. Work now forces all departments to do this. Somehow no manager figured this out before me. We used to have major shutdowns during the holidays. Story 35, back in 2009, I was fairly active on DeviantArt. One day, I happened across a comment by some guy, totally creeping on a female model I was friends with. She didn't notice the comment. Really, she gets it all the time, but I noticed it, and just the tone of it felt really off. He was commenting something like, I had to check your profile to ensure you were 18. Why you look so young? Problem for this idiot is, comment history on DeviantArt is public unless you turn it off. Most people don't know how to turn it off. And this guy was certainly most people, as a curious glance revealed an absolute treasure trove of creepy predatory messages to other girls on the site. Turns out, he included personal information on his profile too, revealing his age to be in his mid-30s, and that he lived in Florida. In his commenting history, one immediately jumped out on a photograph of a girl's torso, her shirt off, arm draped over her breasts. Lovely pic, dear girl, he said. But you should update your profile to say you're 18, so the mods don't take this pic down, and you can post more revealing photos. Quick check to see if this girl also added her personal information to her DeviantArt profile. Yep, she was 14. I reported him to the DeviantArt mods, sent screenshots, sent links to other creepy messages he sent. I then make the mistake of replying to his comment, saying you're disgusting, a real piece of filth. There's some back and forth of him trying to justify himself. I get angrier and say some things that ID later regret. A week goes by. I check in on my report ticket. The guy isn't banned by DeviantArt staff. He's still leaving creepy messages on models' photos, including the 14-year-old girl, complimenting her feminine figure on a bikini shot. I send another report, and then express my frustration publicly. I write a blog post stating that I found a creepy mid-30s guy telling pubescent girls to lie about their age to post nudes on the site, and that DeviantArt wasn't doing anything about it. I stated that I sent reports, and no action had been taken yet. I asked if other people had problems getting reports resolved, or if they knew of any direct means to get in contact with the website admins. Instead of responding to my inquiries, my curious followers instead decided to open up my commenting history. I, too, am certainly most people. They find out who I'm talking about, and a harassment campaign ensues. This guy then goes on the defensive, telling my good friend where I first discovered his comment that he was under attack by my personal army, and he needed help and support. By trying to drag my friend into it, I had no choice but to respond, publicly posting the screenshots of his comment telling a 14-year-old girl to change her age. Somebody in DeviantArt must have noticed this rabble at this point, and DeviantArt came swooping down with the ban hammer on the 14-year-old girl. Yeah, DeviantArt banned the 14-year-old girl for getting groomed by this gross man. They also issued bans and suspensions against everyone who followed my comment history, posted their own journals calling him out, and started harassing this guy. The model I was good friends with was also suspended for a month, for reasons pretty much unknown, probably because she replied to the comment he sent her pleading for help by calling him a low-life pervert. He was not suspended at all, but neither was I. I go absolutely ballistic in a follow-up post, calling out DeviantArt administrators, posting it all on the forums, sending notes like crazy to their community managers, absolutely gobsmacked by the extinction-level asteroid of bullshit that was just hurled at us. I went absolutely bonkers, and the forums were now exploding with several threads calling the guy out, threads pleading others not to succumb to harassment campaigns, and ultimately, a mass locking of all related threads. I woke up the next morning and a familiar account suspended error greeted my homepage. Not the first time I've seen it. I've pulled stupid on DeviantArt before, but it gave me a glimmer of hope. Thing is, when the account is suspended, you can open support tickets to create a line of communication with the site's moderation team. But the weird thing is I didn't open a ticket. They did. DeviantArt's head of community relations greeted me and explained the situation. He thanked me for bringing the guy to their attention and apologized for their ugly handling of the situation, particularly for banning the underage girl, some misunderstanding of events or something like that. He explained that I was given a lenient 1-week suspension for calling the guy out openly, that I should have gotten a month or outright ban for just how crazy it got. He offered me a line of communication to speak with him directly in real time. We had a nice chat about it, and after explaining some things on my end, particularly the guy trying to turn my own friend against me, and how I had no choice but to out him right there, we discussed ways to expedite reports in the future. DeviantArt created the Deviant Safe program in response to it, opening a special line of communication in the help desk for users who feel threatened, or for people like me who discover users encouraging severely egregious acts like encouraging underage girls to change their profile's age so they can post nudes. He assured me that they were sending his information to the FBI and would comply to any other pertinent requests. A blog post was created by the official DeviantArt account, explaining the new site policies around the Deviant Safe program, and in a standalone bullet point very prominently in its own space. Anyone who requests other users to change their age so they can post adult content will be reported to authorities. No exceptions, thus the scuffle was resolved. I took the W and, well, what I thought was a 1-week suspension. Turns out my account snapped back to normal after just 2 days. And at the start of the next month, of all the weirdest things, a new symbol appeared beside my name. I was awarded the rare distinction of a senior DeviantArt member, something only given to those hand-selected by the DeviantArt administrators. Since then, the DeviantArt administrators have been kind of chatty with me. They sometimes reply on my blog posts about stupid I get myself into. They comment on my art from time to time. Then one evening, they invited me out to a dinner with the rest of the staff and a small sampling of very well-known artists in the area, just to get some pizzas and discuss some ideas for handling their new group system. I got to meet the community relations department, but unfortunately, I didn't get to meet the man I called on the phone to ultimately bring Deviant Safe into fruition. He got fired 6 months previous. He teabagged DeviantArt CEO at a Christmas party. Lolly, if you're out there, I want you to know I love you, dude. Story 36 girls were required to wear pants instead of shorts at girls' camp, because my mom saw how many mosquito bites were on my legs after I got back from scout camp. Story 37 summer camp, 7th grade. The camp sold Red Bull at their snack shop. One of my close friends, a 48 boy with ADHD at the time, ended up drinking 5 cans in one sitting, went absolutely mad, then proceeded to pass out. The following year, we found out that Red Bull had been banned after word spread, and a higher-up found out. Story 38 in Europe schools, kids whose parents were poor used to get food tickets. They were simple tickets printed on white paper. I bought 1 ticket from other kid, gone home, and printed a bunch of copies and ate for a month for free. Eventually, they implemented wooden tags that you would have to show when getting food. Not proud of what I did, but I believe new rule was implemented cause of me. Story 39, first year of the company paper airplane distance contest rules. Say, 1 sheet of 8, 5 by 11 paper, no tape, no weight. I crumple my sheet into the smallest ball I can and win the distance contest by 10 yards over second place. Second year of the contest rules are amended to add paper airplane, must be folded and generate aerodynamic lift. I make a triangular football out of my sheet of paper and win the distance contest by a larger margin than the previous year. Third year contest is discontinued. Story 40, now teachers report students when they're out for more than 15 minutes. They used to not do anything when students were ditching. That is until I was found passed out in a bathroom stall after being out of class for 40 minutes. My teacher wrote in the report, I just assumed she was ditching. She hates this class. Story 41, when I was suffering from a recurrence of Hodgkin's lymphoma. In 2000, I need high-dose chemotherapy with an autologous stem cell transplant. My insurance at the time, Blue Cross Blue Shield, stated they would only cover my treatment in a hospital in Boston, a 3-hour drive away. Because I would be so precariously sick, it was recommended I stay in town in Boston until treatment was done 6-9 months. My local Burlington, Vermont hospital was more than capable of treating me. I wrote a letter to Blue Cross Blue Shield stating that although I was the one who was sick, my children would lose the most from this. They were 2 and 5 at the time. To not be there for my children and, God forbid, to never return to them was too much to bear. Blue Cross Blue Shield not only covered my treatment locally, but changed their policy to include my local medical center for covered treatment for anyone. I was treated there and still enjoy my boys who are now 21 and 24.